welcome to the lecture videos for genre fiction. Welcome to my office. This is where I work. I am obviously not on campus right now. So let's see. We're going to talk this week about Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. Like I think I will have explained to you, I'm gonna do these lectures as a series of shorts, so they should be no longer than like 10 minutes. So this is just kind of an intro to this book, and then we'll move into sort of other discussions of more specific topics. Let's talk about Seanan McGuire. Seanan is a hyper-prolific author, really, really big in a lot of different genres right now. She is like one of the most nominated for Hugo and Nebula Awards ever. She's working in these are fantasy books. She also works in hard sci-fi, in horror. She works a little in YA. She writes under the name Mira Grant as well. She puts out a lot of stuff. She is also, and this is going to be relevant as we talk about characters in the book, she's a queer identifying author. So this book was a winner of the Nebula and Hugo Awards for the year that it came out. It's one of the rare books to do both. And what's interesting about this, and we will have talked about the Hugos a little bit, but at the point in 2016 when it won the Hugo, that was still at this moment. The Hugos are done by ballot. And if you are a member of the Science Fiction Writers Association of America, which is sort of our trade group for those of us that work in sci-fi, you get to vote. And during the period that this won, there was something going on that was called the Sad Puppies movement. And what that basically was a group of alt-right writers who decided to create a voting bloc, and they would nominate themselves and writers like them, and try to sort of take over the nominations. And this went on for about 5 years. I think this was like 2013 to 2018. It never amounted to anything. None of them ever won because their books sucked. But the fact that this book won, the fact that this book by a female queer identifying writer won in 2016 for the Hugo Awards is somewhat significant in that it did so against a certain amount of opposition. So, this book is, first of all, it's the first in a series, and it is one of the 2 books that we're going to read this semester that is a series book. Binti is the other one. So our first and last books are first in a series books. This Binti is the first in a trilogy. Every Heart a Doorway is the first in a sort of an ongoing series. There are 5 published and a 6th coming out. And the thing that is really interesting about this series is that it is non-sequential. So I think 3 of the books, like books 1, 3, and 5, you sort of have to read in order, but 2 and 4 predate the stuff that happens in this book and don't really reference it at all. And then the one that's coming out, I think, in January doesn't actually include any of the characters from this book. So it's an interesting way to build out a series, and when we talk about world building, that's going to become relevant, because I think what McGuire has kind of done here is like build herself a story engine, like an amount of space to work in, and I want us to think about how she's going to play in that space. So it is also, in addition to being one of the 2 works that are series books, it's one of, I'm going to say, 3 that are not quite YA books, but are participating in YA, that are responding to or are in conversation with conventions of YA. And those three that I'm thinking of are this one, um, All the Birds in the Sky, at least the first half of All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie James Anders, and definitely Binti by Nadia Okorafor, which will be the last one that we read. And so I think this one in particular is sort of about YA and about children's literature without actually being of it. And I really want us to talk about, when we get into discussion, the ways in which McGuire distances from that, and the ways in which she announces that she's doing something quite different. This book, we're talking about it as YA or children's lit. It's also it's one of our fantasy novels for the semester, and it is specifically because fantasy has like loads and loads of subgenres. This is what we would call portal fantasy. And so the classic works of portal fantasy are number one, well, not in order, are The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Narnia books, which are a sort of weird, repeated portal fantasy where the portal keeps reappearing. Obviously, the first time it's in the wardrobe, and then the kids keep finding different ways back into that world, which is interesting to think about when we think about this book. And then there's the classic one, which is Alice, which is Alice in Wonderland. And again, Alice has two entrance ways into, first she falls into the rabbit hole, and then later she'll go through the looking glass. And please know that McGuire is aware of all of these. McGuire is is a scholar of the genres that she works in. She doesn't mess around. And one of the ways that she announces that is by the section title of the first section, which is Golden Afternoons. So Golden Afternoon is the poem that precedes the Alice novels, or the first Alice novel, and it is I may put it up on Moodle for you guys. I will put it up on Moodle for you guys. It's not very good. It is Charles Dodson, Lewis Carroll, writing about a boating trip with the Little Sisters, Liddell, the youngest of them being Alice. And these are the boating trips on which he started to sort of generate the ideas that became the Alice books. And there are questions around that relationship, and about his relationship with those kids, and we're gonna leave those out. Let's get to the book. We're gonna talk a little bit about the book, and then we're gonna cut off because I'm already sort of running over my allotted time, and I want to start at the very beginning, which introduces a really weird bit. So the first chapter title is There Was a Little Girl, and then the first line is that the girls were never present for the entrance interviews. So what McGuire is doing, on one hand, is telling you that it's in the tradition of these portal novels, of these novels about children, because in portal novel, only in portal fantasy, only kids ever find it. Adults never stumble across these magical doorways. And that is going to change a little bit when we get to Gothic literature, but we're going to save that for later. So announcing the title as There Was a Little Girl, and then leading with the first line of The Girls Are Never There, is a way for McGuire to sort of, like I said, announce what she's doing, and announce that this is not a kid's book, because it is not. It's super violent. It has, some sexual content, and it's something that she is conscious of and is worried about. But it establishes the audience as adults, and then immediately distances us as adults, as the audience, from the book, because in a way talking about these entrance interviews, it's talking about how do I put this? It's making it seem like the book is not for us. But if you've found this book, if you found it already, you have some sort of affinity for this type of fiction. You have some type of understanding of these stories. And what we're being told about the school, or being announced about the school, is the way it presents itself, and that it presents itself as being not for you. That it's for people who don't understand this. So I think that's interesting. I think that's something that we're going to want to come to in discussion, as to like who the audience is, and who the book is for. And then we're introduced to Eleanor West, and Eleanor, I think, in my opinion, is the only character in the book that is actually like mapped onto an existing fiction. Like Eleanor is mapped onto Alice in a way that I don't think anybody else is really mapped onto a character that we know. Like my sense in that Eleanor has like gone back and forth with her nonsense world. Oh, by the way, guys, this is my dog. She's scrabbling around behind me. This is Willa. She will probably be joining us for a lot of our lectures. I think that Eleanor is to be understood as a grown-up Alice in a way that none of the other characters are supposed to be direct analogs of other fictional characters. And which is sort of interesting because there is a history of there are other books and texts that like posit an adult Alice. The biggest one is probably Dream Child, which is this weird movie from the 80s that includes some Jim Henson Muppetry. And one of the big ways that I think that she does that is through the first line of the actual first chapter, the habit of narration. Again, dog. So if you've read the Alice books, and if you haven't read the Alice books, you really should. They're a lot of fun. You'll know that Alice constantly narrates what is happening to her. She's talking about this out loud. And so the first line of the first chapter, the habit of narration, of crafting something miraculous out of the commonplace, was hard to break. To my mind, that really, really like hard maps Eleanor onto Alice. And the other thing that I want to talk about, because I am already running over the time that I wanted to do for this, is that we get to the inscription outside of Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children. No solicitations, no visitors, no quests. This book is largely about rules. There's going to be a lot of discussion about rules. And the fundamental rule of a rule in narrative, particularly in fantasy narrative, is that those rules are made to be broken. If a book announces itself, if a book says at the beginning, no one ever made it out of Dead Man's Cave, you're about to be told the story of people who made it out of Dead Man's Cave. So, when we get the inscription at the very beginning, no quests, we know that sooner or later, because this is a fantasy novel, and because there are conventions, and we're going to talk a lot this semester about conventions, that sooner or later that convention is going to be broken, and that we are fundamentally going to embark upon a quest. Alright, that was longer than I wanted, and I will get better at this as the semester goes on. So we'll talk more. I think we're going to talk about world building next, and see you guys soon.